Middle age starts about the age of 30. And in today's society, we place a lot of value on a youthful appearance, which a lot of people might find disheartening and not look forward to as they're aging. A few things that start to change as you grow older is height, weight, and strength. For height, that doesn't usually occur until about the age of 55. And for most women, they would lose about 2 inches over their lifespan, and men only 1. Osteoporosis is another thing that older people need to start looking out for. Or, well, not older, but middle-aged. Sorry, Mr. Wire. Osteoporosis occurs when the bones become brittle from lack of calcium. A way to avoid this is for people to eat a diet more rich in calcium and to make sure they're getting enough exercise. Sadly, body fat tends to grow in the average person as they age. And again, a lot of people are not looking forward to this, including me. But to avoid this, one can just stay healthy and exercise a lot. Strength here declines, but only about, I believe, 10% by the age of 60 in most people, which again can be avoided if you just stay fit throughout your life and you keep working. Senses also tend to deteriorate throughout the lifespan. At about 40, visual acuity, which is the ability to discern fine spatial detail in both eyes and distant objects, begins to decline. Also, the shape of the eye lenses change and elasticity deteriorates. Hearing also undergoes a gradual change. Usually, the ability to hear high-pitched noises starts to fade first. And reaction time stays relatively the same. Another huge thing that happens to women when they start to age is menopause, which is the ceasing of the menstruation. Happens around about 47 or 48, but can occur as early as 40 or as late as 60. It means that a woman can no longer get pregnant. The production of hormones begins to drop, producing a variety of symptoms such as hot flashes, headaches, and dizziness.
Margie Lachman is a professor of psychology at Rice University in Waltham, Massachusetts, and her focus in college and now what she teaches is that lifespan development, especially during the midlife, which of course is very useful for us. And so her findings and her personal belief that she's backed up with research, which Chantel will talk about, is that the midlife isn't so much a crisis, although some people do self-report having a crisis, that it's more just of a time of transition and re-questioning everything that you'd previously thought, all your morals, your values, and you just kind of reevaluate everything. And sometimes that does lead to changes, and sometimes those changes are drastic, which could constitute maybe as a crisis for some people. But however, for the majority of the demographic of people living in the midlife, it's not so much a crisis as it is just a transition into the later portion of your life.
Yeah, so during the midlife, a lot of people are caring for their younger or the older, and this occurs in both the family and in the workplace. So again, with the transition, she states that research evidence suggests that a midlife crisis is not normative, but tied to stable personality characteristics. We learn that most personality traits remain relatively stable throughout one's lifetime, but she says that there are a few aspects that may change a little over the years, such as gender role characteristics and one's sense of control.
So I want to focus on an article. It was a study conducted by Liban, and he was talking about the curve of life satisfaction, which actually is like a U-curve like this. And so with the age, you start out and you're extremely happy as a child, and then it slowly decreases, but then it does a huge divot in the midlife, and then it actually increases with the older you get. So the older you get, the happier you are, and it's in this huge curve. But it does dip down in the middle during the midlife. And so his study was conducted in the psychiatric ward of a hospital, and he took the demographic, like why they were there, the gender, it was totally anonymous, but why they were there, the gender, and the age of the people. And he found that a few more females versus males were actually in there for things, and they were admitted for a series of things like adaptive disorder, lots of major depression, and then drinking, alcohol dependence, and then although only one of the patients stayed up for longer than 90 days, most of the patients were there for a significant amount of time. And so the study provided evidence that the most common ages for psychiatric disorders is in the 40 to 50 year range. So, and in a hospital, anyone could get admitted. It wasn't like people of the lower class who couldn't pay weren't admitted. It was anyone who's a danger to themselves or others. So it had a really wide demographic of anyone that was admitted. And so also when they graphed the ages of the people that were in the psych ward and they put it right next to the U curve of the life satisfaction, they found that it was almost exactly the same. It showed the same kind of U shape. And also that the life satisfaction was exactly the same, that even of the people that were there for psychological disorders, they still had a higher life satisfaction than those that were there with the psychological disorders in midlife.
So there's a 10-year study called the MacArthur study, and it was conducted in about 1999, and it was one of the hugest midlife studies at the time. It involved 7,800 Americans between the ages of 25 and 75, and more than 3,000 people were interviewed between the ages of 35 and 65, and they answered over 1,000 questions. The researchers actually found that most middle-aged people, this time, it turned out to be the most fulfilling time of their life, actually. So, another conclusion that was reached was that middle age was the period that older people actually wanted to go back to instead of maybe like in their 20s or even adolescence. So when asked what age they would like to go back to, men 65 to 70 said they would like to be 32 years younger. Women of the same age wanted to be 28 years younger, and women 25 to 35 wanted to clip off an average of only about 5 years. So Orville Gilbert Brim, the director of this research, notes that people are giving the midlife a very high satisfaction rating, contrary to society's belief. The only two things that people showed dissatisfaction for are sex and money. The participants felt like they weren't having enough of either. But, again, according to today's glamorized view of a midlife crisis, it is widely thought to be an experience of psychological turmoil, but instead 9 out of 10 people in the study reported never experiencing this midlife crisis. So the general conclusion is that people confuse a midlife crisis with a stressful event that occurs during midlife, such as losing a job, having a child move out, or financial problems.
So also what happens during the midlife is that the personality can change a bit, but there's actually two types of theories on this personality changing. The first one is the normative crisis theory, and it suggests that people go through periods of turmoil during the midlife, and that's normal and everyone goes through it. It's just something that happens. And then the other theory is that it's like the life events theory, and that's that, crazy things happen in people's midlife, like, health issues or like family issues, marriage issues, work issues, and that's what causes the actual turmoil and like questioning of one's life. And so the first one, the normative life crisis, it says it's kind of something that just happens to everyone. It's just part of being human. That's almost like the nature part of, the argument that, yeah, it just happens because that's part of human nature. And that agrees with Erik Erikson's psychosocial development theories, that that's just part of life, and that's, something that happens up in people's brains. Everyone has it. But the other one is like the nurture part. It's external influences that cause someone to have a midlife crisis or lots of turmoil and questioning and change in their midlife. And different theorists actually disagree on whether or not personalities, whether or not they stay stable after and during the midlife crisis, or whether they completely change, turn around because of decisions that happen during the midlife.
Alright, now moving on to the actual midlife crisis. we come up with the controversy of whether it does or doesn't exist. Now, I, for one, I don't think it exists, and that's the side I'm going to take in the rest of this presentation. So, according to psychologist Oliver Robinson, he tells us that instead of just having one crisis, there are many people could have to go throughout an entire lifetime, not just in the midlife. Like through the age of 20 to the age of about 60, he goes over several different crises a person could go through. For example, in your 20s, he says that a crisis could be like whether the correct decisions are being made regarding the rest of your life, like going to the right college, getting the right education, getting the right job. For the age of 30, he says that work-related issues and breakups are the most prominent. When the 40s are reached, bereavement and jobs prevail. And at 50 or 60, retirement issues could become a problem and awareness of one's mortality is heightened. So these are all different crises that someone could go through. There is no actual clear-cut age at which a crisis is going to occur. So everyone goes through a hard time at points in their life. However, there is no evidence that any of these tough times constitute a midlife crisis, so to speak, especially because these crises can occur throughout the lifetime and not just during a specific decade in the midlife.
I'm so excited about my new college class. I have to talk to you. It's serious. I'm leaving you. It's okay. It's not you, it's me. I found that I can have a more colorful life. As you'll see over in that big stable where I got a better job, everything's more colorful. I've even found a more colorful woman. She's so bright and vibrant, and I have riches and wonderful clothes. I'll be happy. I hope you will too. Now, that might be an exaggeration, but as it turns out, there's lots of changes and reevaluation that happens in the midlife. A few of the social changes that happen, there's 3 I want to talk about: marriage, family evolutions, and work. So the first one I want to talk about is marriage. So the demographic for marriage now is, as you might know, completely different from the marriage demographic they had just 150 to 100 years ago, which may seem like a long time, but it's not when you think about human history. And so in the past, you were more likely to just be married and have kids and just stay with that one person. However, you're much, much more likely now to either be single, divorced, or living with a partner. And during midlife, many families actually blend. If you get divorced earlier in life, 75 to 80% of divorcees get remarried during their midlife or right before. And so divorce rates have declined overall in the past 2 years, but the divorce rates in midlife have actually risen. So less people overall are getting divorced, but people in midlife who are getting divorced has raised a lot. Because the thought process is now changing. Once you've stuck with someone for about 20 years, you might as well stick it out for the rest of the time, but lots of people are just restarting their lives and figuring that it's okay to get divorced. And the next would be family evolutions. You go from a full house to what's called an empty nest, where all your kids just kind of leave, they go out, start their own lives, and it's more common to have them move back in, but still you get an empty nest. And so this you may experience unhappiness, loneliness, and even severe depression at times. And it's such a common compilation of symptoms that it's actually called the empty nest syndrome. And it can be hard to transition and to find other things to fulfill your time, but people often find success in this by picking up new sports, such as men will often turn to golf or volunteer in the community. Women will oftentimes go back to school or find volunteer positions. The third one is work. Often, people will experience burnout, especially in low to mid-paying jobs that are service-oriented. They feel like they aren't making a difference, and they experience burnout. And it's not uncommon to start midlife questioning, which can lead to a crisis. And also, it's not untypical to change jobs. And many people in midlife, contrary to common belief, actually become more involved in the community than not. Chantel, thank you for seeing me today.
Okay.
Now tell me, how do you feel about the cognitive changes in the midlife crisis?
Well, you see, I wrote about it in my dream journal, and I'll just tell you what I think about it. So, based on research, a lot of people think that intelligence begins to decrease within the mid-20s. In cross-sectional studies, which are the studies of people with different ages, but not the same people, different people, it showed that the younger group scored better on intelligence tests than the older people. However, there's a problem here because of cohort effects, which means that oh man, I'm just so nervous to be here right now.
I understand. Just continue when you're ready.
The cohort effects are influences associated with growing up at a different time period, such as older people not having the same education that the younger people have. In longitudinal studies, if I said that right, it showed that adults tend to show fairly stable and even an increase of intelligence. Oh, and this kind of study is the same people as they grow older. The only drawbacks for this is they might take the same test multiple times and they'll be more prepared and know the material better. And also, they can practice. Also, researchers have come across two different kinds of intelligence. There's fluid intelligence, which is the information processing capabilities we hold, such as memorizing a set of numbers. And there's also crystallized information, or crystallized intelligence, excuse me. Information, skills, not skits, and strategies people learned and accumulated through experience that can be applied to solving problems. The research showed that fluid intelligence might usually declines with age, but crystallized influence holds steady and may even increase. On to memory. Sensory memory is the initial momentary storage of info, and that moves to short term. And then if you rehearse it enough, it'll move to long term. And then as people age, usually the long-term memory declines. People recall these things through schemas, though. Schemas help represent the way the world is organized and allows them to categorize and interpret how the info is stored. They help to organize their behavior into coherent wholes and helps them to interpret social events such as eating at a restaurant.
I'm glad you shared this, Chantel.
It was hard.
There's big 5 personality traits that almost everybody has in different levels. And the first one is neuroticism, which is a person's, whether or not they're like moody or anxious or really, really self-critical, that would be like being neurotic. And the next one is extroversion. Extroversion is how shy someone is. That would not being very extroverted, or if they're really, really outgoing. The third is openness, and that's a person's tendency or attraction towards trying new things and having new experiences. So like a homebody would be someone who's not very open to trying new things. And the next is agreeableness, and that's how helpful, how agreeable, like how just easygoing that they are in general. And conscientiousness is like how responsible someone is, how organized they are, and like how they kind of keep their life in order. And so a majority of studies show that actually these 5 traits, they can be kind of turbulent in the teenage years, but they stable out in the midlife at about age 30. But studies also show that these different 5 personality traits can help predict, it's not 100% correct, but can help predict how likely you are to actually have like a midlife crisis. And so if you're really neurotic, the neuroticism, you're more likely to have a midlife crisis. And also if the openness, if you really like trying new things, you're more likely to have like a changing experience and try lots of new things, which could be considered as a midlife crisis. And then extroversion, if you're really shy, so you've got really low levels of that, you're less likely to have a midlife crisis. And if you're really agreeableness, that one wasn't really in there a lot, but the more agreeable you are, the more likely you are to stay in a stable marriage, have good family relationships, and stay in a stable job, and so you're less likely to have the traditional midlife crisis. And then conscientiousness, the more responsible you are, the less likely you are to have your life thrown up in disarray and things like that. And usually conscientious people are really health conscious as well, and they're less likely to have a midlife crisis. So it's gonna be on the video. I want that to be on the video. Okay,
should I restart that?